Hey Siri, turn the reading light on. Reading can make you more knowledgeable about the world around you, more empathetic and understanding toward other people, and more inspired to become the person that you want to be. I feel like every book that I've ever read has had a lasting impact on who I am by teaching me something new or shifting my perspective in some way. Last year I read a whole bunch of books, but I've picked out 5 that I think are must-reads for anybody who wants to expand their point of view, learn something new, or just become a better version of themselves. The first book that I want to talk about is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari. Sapiens has been praised by people like President Obama, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg, and it starts by discussing the earliest humans and what their day-to-day lives might have been like long before any written history. The author then goes through all of human history, how we started trekking the globe and discovering new lands, learning to think and reason, and creating cultures, societies, and economies. He talks about how even today, with all of the technology and science that we have, we're still consuming 90% of our calories from foods that were domesticated thousands of years ago in the agricultural revolution. Foods like rice, corn, potatoes, wheat. One of the things that stuck with me the most is learning how humans have always shaped the world around them, often for the worse. Archaeological records indicate that every time humans discovered a new land, their arrival was followed by thousands of years of extinctions for all the animals and plants that had lived there before. If you want to learn more about humanity and history, or put your life into the context of the larger human experience, or maybe just get a glimpse at how humans have shaped our planet, Sapiens is a great pick for you. In 2020, there was a much needed spotlight on racial injustice in the United States. The historic protests and the global focus on racism in America led me to seek out a little bit more understanding on our country's racial history. The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein is a must-read for anybody living in America. In this book, Rothstein argues that when the United States enforced segregation and denied black families access to the middle class, the governments responsible, local, state, and federal, they acted against our Constitution, and that because these injustices were state-sponsored, it's up to the nation to provide a remedy. Rothstein provides example after example of explicit state-sponsored discrimination, like when one government-sponsored corporation got to decide which places were safe and had homes that would retain their value, and which places were deemed financially risky and were less likely to receive low-interest government mortgages. This corporation gave one St. Louis suburb a safe rating because it had, let me quote one of the actual appraisers, "not a single foreigner or Negro." While another similar middle-class neighborhood got the risky rating because it had, another quote, "little or no value today due to the colored element controlling the district." That's just one example, but policies like these were widespread, and while most of these policies aren't still written into law, their effects remain, which is why our schools today are even more segregated than they were back in the 70s. By learning how we got here and confronting these uncomfortable truths, we can start to reckon with our country's racism and start working together on solutions to repair as much of the damage as we can. So if you want to better understand the hardships and frustrations of your black friends and family, or you want to learn more about state-sponsored racism in America, or maybe you just don't even understand why any of this still matters today, wherever you are with your relationship with racism in America, you need to read The Color of Law. The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard describes the expansive global assembly line of turning raw materials into consumer products that we buy, and even what happens to them after that. In this book, Leonard describes many of the problems with our consumerist, growth-driven society. Problems like pollution in our lands and waterways, scarcity of water and other resources, insane amounts of waste at every step of production, lower overall rates of happiness, and devastating working conditions for the poorest countries. Learning about all of these problems is eye-opening and really important, but I don't want you to get the idea that this book is just like a depressing downer that you don't want to read. For each of these problems, Leonard provides a section of hope, where she describes some of the progress being made to do things better, as well as all kinds of alternatives that we can explore or work on our own to contribute to a better, more sustainable planet. I know that after learning more about the entire process of manufacturing products and the resources that go into them and the effects that this manufacturing process has on the local environments and people, I always think twice before making a purchase. For example, I might purchase an ebook instead of a physical copy when I know that for every 1 ton of paper that we produce, 98 tons of other materials go into that process. I can also make better purchasing decisions when I know that a single cup of coffee requires about 36 gallons of water to make. That's a pretty big number in a world where 1 in 6 people don't have access to clean water. I love this book because it's turned me into a more ethical consumer. Now, I'm not perfect or anywhere close to that, but I do tend to think of all the effects of a product before I make a purchase. I wish this book could be required reading for everybody on the planet because the information in here is vital to creating a more sustainable and healthier planet for ourselves and future generations. After a grueling election year and a constant feeling of frustration and anxiety, I was inspired to learn how my use of social media was affecting my mental health. I first turned to a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, where I learned about Jaron Lanier and his book, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, where he argues that social media is taking away our free will, undermining truth, and making us unhappy, cynical, and less empathetic. Since most of these platforms are free, these companies get their money by getting you to click on or engage with ultra-targeted specific ads that are chosen for you by an extensive data profile that knows everything about you, things that you don't even know about yourself. And research shows that these custom-tailored feeds designed to keep you scrolling longer are actually making you feel worse. But the bright side is, we don't need social media. We have plenty of ways to stay in touch with loved ones without using platforms that bring out the worst in all of us. And there are a ton of paid news sources that don't have to spy on you and sell your data to stay in business. In fact, it's social media companies that need us. Without our cooperation, attention, and private data, their business model doesn't work. I'll admit, I didn't run out and delete all my social accounts as soon as I finished the book, and the author even says that total deletion might not be for everybody. But I did remove some apps from my home screen, which adds an extra layer of friction anytime I want to access them. I also set app limits, so my phone automatically locks down certain social apps after I've used them for too long. I'm now much more mindful about how I spend my time online. If you felt the same heightened anxiety I have, or you've seen stress in your relationships, or maybe you just feel a little drained or bummed out after scrolling your social feeds for too long, I really recommend checking out this book, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. Most of us have way more stuff than we really need, and often buying, using, maintaining, and storing all of that stuff gets in the way of what's really important. In The Minimalist Home, Joshua Becker recommends a different approach. He spends the first few chapters talking about the benefits of a minimalist lifestyle, which I should clarify doesn't mean getting rid of all of your possessions and living on just the bare essentials. Becker's definition of minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things we most value and removal of anything that distracts us from them. It means focusing on what's important and letting go of the things that don't serve you. After hopefully convincing you that minimalism can improve your life, the rest of the book is a room-by-room guide on how to minimize your own home. For each space in the home, Becker identifies some of the common items that we're all hanging on to that most of us probably don't really need. And he talks through how to work through that clutter so that every space in your home does its best job of serving its purpose without all of the clutter that bogs us down and stresses us out. I've been interested in minimalism for a few years. In fact, last year before we moved, I even purged a huge number of my possessions. But wow, Becker really called me out on all kinds of places where I was keeping too much stuff. Just one example is my bathroom sink. My sink was surrounded by the stuff that I used every day, things like a hairbrush, a hairdryer, a toothbrush, and toothpaste, my deodorant. This honestly felt pretty minimal to me. It's the stuff that I use every day. But after using the Becker method in my bathroom, I realized that I enjoyed this space so much more when I put those things out of sight when they weren't being used. Taking the toothpaste out of the drawer takes 2 seconds, so I'm not saving a lot of time by leaving it out on the sink, where it serves as distracting clutter for 99% of the day. This book will help you get on board with some of the benefits you hear minimalists going on about, and by the end of the process, your home will have less clutter to distract you from what's important. I truly believe all the books I mentioned today have made me a better person. They've all taught me something that I know is going to stick with me for the rest of my life. If any of these books sounded all interesting to you, I hope you'll check them out. I have links in the description where you can buy any of them, and you can probably find them all at your local library too. If you end up reading any, please let me know in the comments which ones you're enjoying. I promise you'll get something valuable from any of them.